blue sky, please tell us why you had to hide away for so long. Where did we go wrong? Mr. Blue Sky, please tell us why you had to hide away for so long. Where did we go wrong? Blue sky, please tell us why you had to hide away for so long. Where did we go wrong? Hey there, Mr. Blue, we're so pleased to be with you. Look around, see what you do. Everybody smiles at you. Hey there, Mr. Blue, we're so pleased to be with you. Look around, see what you do. Everybody smiles at you. Mr. Blue Sky, Mr. Blue Sky, Mr. Blue Sky. Mr. Blue, you did it right, but soon comes Mr. Night, creeping over. Now his hand is on your shoulder. Never mind, I remember you this way. Mr. Blue Sky, tell us why you had to hide away for so long. Where did we go wrong? Hey there, Mr. Blue, we're so pleased to be with you. Look around, see what you do. Everybody smiles at you. take our time tonight, girl. Above us, all the stars are watching. There's no place I'd rather be in this world. Your eyes are where I'm lost in. Underneath the chandelier, we're dancing all alone. There's no reason to hide what we're feeling inside right now. So baby, let's just turn down the lights and close the door. Ooh, I love that dress, but you won't need it anymore. No, you won't need it no more. Let's just kiss till we're naked, baby. Versace on the floor. Ooh, take it off for me, for me, for me, for me now, girl. Versace on the floor. Ooh, take it off for me, for me, for me, for me now, girl. I'll unzip the bag and watch it fall while I kiss your neck and shoulders. No, don't be afraid to show it all. I'll be right here ready to hold ya. Girl, you know you're perfect from your head down to your heels. Don't be confused by my swag, 'cause I ain't never been more for real, for real. So just turn down the lights and close the door. Ooh, I love that dress, but you won't need it anymore. No, you won't need it no more. Let's just kiss till we're naked, baby. Versace on the floor. Ooh, take it off for me, for me, for me, for me now, girl. Versace on the floor. Ooh, take it off for me, for me, for me, for me now, girl. Dance. It's warming up, can you feel it? It's warming up, can you feel it? It's warming up, can you feel it, baby? It's warming up. Seems like you're ready for more, more, more. Let's just kiss till we're naked. Ooh, Versace on the floor. Hey, baby, take it off for me, for me, for me, for me now, girl. Versace on the floor. Oh, oh, oh. Take it off for me, for me, for me, for me now, girl. Versace on the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the former Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs for the U.S. Department of the Treasury, Monica Crowley.
For that. You know, it's an absolute honor for me to be here today with all of you and with these two all-stars that are going to join us here in just a minute. But the truth is that the real all-stars are all of you. And the reason that you're all-stars, two reasons. First, because you have just survived an absolutely horrific natural disaster with great grace and great strength. And we are all with you. We're so proud to be with you here today. You are the real heroes. And the second reason you guys are all-stars is because you hold the fate of America and really the West in your hands right here in North Carolina. No pressure, right? 10 days to rescue the Republic. And there is only one person who can truly do it, and that is the twice impeached, indicted, arrested, shot felon McDonald's fry cook. Guys, long before President Trump even thought about entering politics, he was thinking about each and every one of you. He's long been talking about the forgotten men and women of this country who have been screwed by the Uni-Party in Washington, D.C., and by the globalists, both here and abroad. And so in 2015 and 2016, he decided to do something that was quite remarkable: stand up for all of you. And back then, he said something that, to me, is the most powerful thing I have ever heard come from any political leader ever. He looked all of you in the eye, and most of our leaders will never look you in the eye because they're lying to you and selling you out. But Donald Trump looked you square in the eye, and he said, again, the most powerful thing, he said, "I see you, I hear you, and I will be your champion." And for the next 4 years, I mean, we all took a giant leap of faith back in 2016 and elected him because here's a guy who had never done any of this before. And we hoped and prayed that he would deliver on those promises. And you know what? He did. 4 years, he delivered a booming economy, an enforced border, law and order, and world peace. I don't know what more people expect. I don't know what more people expect or want from an American president. He delivered everything you hire an American president for. And in a second term, he's going to do all of that times 10. And I just briefly want to drill down on the U.S. economy because I was very honored to serve 2 years at the U.S. Treasury Department. Donald Trump gave you a robust economy based on 4 policy pillars: tax cuts, regulatory relief, unleashing our great energy sector, and striking fair trade deals with our most existential enemy, the Chinese Communist Party, and also Canada, Mexico, Japan, and South Korea. I don't know if you guys appreciate how hard it is to strike a new trade deal with our trading partners, especially one of our worst enemies on the planet. But he did it, and he did it for every single person in this room. He did it to protect America's workers. He did it to onshore manufacturing back to the United States. And he accomplished it to the tune of nearly 500,000 new manufacturing jobs. He is going to do all of that, plus he's going to add his new and creative policy ideas the second time, including no tax on tips. Can I get an amen? No tax on overtime. How about no tax on Social Security benefits? And by the way, to all of the younger people in this audience politely applauding that, y'all are going to need Social Security at some point. And he's also going to make car loans tax deductible so he can put all of us into new cars. He is going to make America affordable again. You know, I am a believer, and I firmly believe that Donald Trump has the hand of God on him. But as the old saying goes, God helps those who help themselves. So we need everybody in this room to be a force multiplier. We need you to do a couple of things here to amplify over the next 10 days President Trump's message, but also the get out the vote. And I know here you're very close to the hurricane damage, and it's been exceedingly difficult. We have to save our country. So we need each and every one of you to amplify tenfold if you can. We need you to vote early if you haven't already. We need you to bank your vote so that the Trump campaign is not spending time and resources tracking all of you down, and they can redirect those energies to tracking down low propensity voters, okay? We need you to do phone banking. We need you to do door knocking. You can do that through TrumpForce47.com. We need you to be poll watchers and poll workers. You can do that through ProtectTheVote.com. And we also need you to have possibly uncomfortable conversations. I'm sure all of you have people in your lives, maybe even your family, every family is a black sheep, who may not be voting for President Trump. We need you to have those conversations with them. Yesterday, I got into an Uber in New York, and when I got in the car, the driver was undecided. By the time I got out of the car, he was voting for President Trump. So I need you guys to do all of that over the next 10 days because we have a country to save. And I want to thank you all so much for being here and for caring enough about your country to be here on a Saturday afternoon. Are you guys ready to make America healthy again? Are you guys ready to make America great again? All right, let's rock. We are joined today by two of the Avenger superheroes that President Trump has assembled to help us make America healthy and great again. Please welcome former presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and former presidential candidate and Congresswoman
Devil without a cause, and I'm back with the beaver hats and Ben Davis slacks, 30-pack of stroll, 30-pack of hoes. No Rogaine in the propane flows. The chosen one, I'm the living proof with the gift of gab from the city of truth. I jabbed and stabbed and knocked critics back, and I did not stutter when I said that. I'm going platinum, selling right.
Hi, guys.
Hey,
Hi, welcome.
thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for coming out today, everybody.
Right? Isn't this a good-looking crowd? Well, I want to thank you both for being here and for taking on this mission to rescue the Republic, and we only have 10 days left to do it. First of all, Tulsi, welcome to the Republican Party.
Thank you.
We are very happy to have you. And Bobby, is there any announcement you want to make today?
Not today.
Okay. Well, you're both lifelong Democrats and both legendary Democrats in so many ways. And yet, you've left the party because you have said that the party has left you. And that's a common refrain. But was there a seminal moment? Did you have some sort of epiphany? Did it happen immediately? Was it gradual? Why did you leave the political party that had been your home for so many decades?
It wasn't one single moment. And when you look at all of the major issues that we're facing today that are rooted in our Constitution and the challenges to our fundamental God-given rights and freedoms, this is not something that's just happened overnight. For me, I was a Democrat for over 20 years. I served in Congress for 8 years. I was a vice chair of the DNC for 3 years. I ran for president in a Democratic primary. And throughout that period of time, especially when I was involved in the national level of politics, I started to see more and more firsthand and experience firsthand this erosion of the things that had once attracted me to the Democrat Party in the first place. The party that I joined was a big tent open party. It welcomed people from all different backgrounds. It was a party that still cared about defending free speech, that still understood the truth that if any one of our right to free speech is taken away, then you might be next. You might be next. Who knows? No one will be safe. I saw the party that used to have courageous voices and leaders calling for peace now becoming the party of warmongers. Today, as we see Kamala Harris shamelessly embracing and welcoming proudly the endorsement of Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and others who are firmly entrenched in that warmongering uniparty of Washington. It has become the party of war. It used to be the party of working people, especially in my home state of Hawaii. The Democrat Party was rooted in being the champions for the rights and fair pay for working people. When we look on all of these fronts, the Democrat Party of today is the exact opposite of what it was. In my different positions holding office, I did my best to try to bring about change and to try to bring the party back to being the party of President John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, a party that went beyond race and judged each other by our character. But what I experienced there at every level was not only a lack of a desire to go back to the roots of the Democratic Party, but it was a direct rejection of anyone who dared to challenge their current agenda of the Democrat Party today. This radical extreme agenda that we're experiencing, we've experienced over the last 4 years. And so what I experienced for many years, even as a Democrat in Congress, really began my first year there when I came out publicly and opposed a request that President Obama was bringing to Congress to start another regime change war in the Middle East. That was the beginning of what would be a years-long onslaught of attacks and smear attempts and censorship attempts and so forth, political retaliation by my former political party. So all of those things really drove me to a point where I said, how could I associate myself with a political party that fundamentally is against freedom and is openly rejecting the Constitution and brazenly abusing their power? So I left.
Yes. Thank you, Tulsi. Bobby?
I mean, I have much the same story, and the ideological transformation that Tulsi just described, but my roots in the Democratic Party are probably even deeper than hers. My family has been a centerpiece and the flag carriers for the Democratic Party for generations. All of my grandparents came over in 1848 during the potato famine. They came over to Boston. They came over penniless. The Democratic Party met them on the docks in Boston and made sure that they had homes, made sure that they had food, that they were given jobs, and took care of them. And the Democratic Party was the party of the poor, working people, the voiceless, the alienated, the dispossessed. It was the party that really was striving for the highest ideals of the American promise, which was that we could all participate in the American dream. And the fundamental assumption of the Democratic Party was that of liberalism, the word liberal means freedom of speech. We were a nation of diversity. We were all different colors, unlike any nation in the world. We're every race, we're every national origin, we're hundreds of languages that people speak in this country. And the things that hold us together are the landscapes and the land, but more importantly, the Constitution. And that's what we all swear allegiance to. That's what, when you go into the military, when you take public office, you swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States. The word liberal is derived from a term that means freedom of speech. My uncle was the first, my great-grandfather, Honey Fitz, was the first Irish Catholic mayor of Boston. His contemporary, Patrick Joseph Kennedy, was a state senator and a political boss in Boston. My uncle, all of my uncles, my Uncle Joe, who was killed during World War II, spoke at the 1948 Democratic National Convention. My uncle, John Kennedy, was the first Irish Catholic president of the United States. My father was his attorney general, was a senator from Boston, from New York. And it was unthinkable for me when I launched this campaign that I would ever leave the Democratic Party. And I was really the last person in my campaign to except for my wife, who really did not want me to leave the Democratic Party, to make the decision, to realize, to come to the realization the Democratic Party was gone, that I grew up with. It was, my uncle said that the principal job of the President of the United States was to keep the country out of war, and he never sent a combat troop abroad to die, an American combat troop. My father ran again. In fact, 30 days before he died, my uncle signed National Security Order 263, ordering all the military advisors he had sent, reluctantly 16,000 military advisors who weren't allowed to participate in combat. They did, but they, under the rules of his rules of engagement, they weren't permitted to. He learned on the morning of October 22nd, 1963, that 76 Americans had died in Vietnam. And he said, that's too many, it's their war, they've got to fight it. And he ordered them all home, all military personnel within a year home, with the first 1,000 coming home in beginning in November, end of November, beginning of December. And 30 days after he signed that order, on November 22nd, he was killed. And a week later, President Johnson remanded that order and then sent 250,000 troops abroad. And, my father ran against Johnson in his own political party in '68 on the Vietnam War issue. He was killed in June of '68. Nixon won the election, sent 560,000 troops over, and 56,000 Americans never came home, including my cousin, George Skakel, who died in the Tet Offensive. But the Democratic Party has always been the party against war. My uncle Ted Kennedy was the leading spokesman against the Iraq War. And now the Democratic Party is the party of war. It's the party of Dick Cheney, who wrote, and John Bolton, who together wrote the Patriot Act, which began the dismantling of the American Constitution, the permission for the first time for the CIA to spy on the American public. We were the party that was skeptical and suspicious and hostile to the CIA. And this Democratic convention, you had Kamala Harris making a neocon. We drove the neocons out of office, and they ended up running our party. Dick Cheney has not changed his opinion about the Iraq War, which he lied us into, he and John Bolton. And he still thinks it's a good idea. And, Kamala Harris made a neocon, belligerent, pugnacious, America is the policeman of the world speech at the Democratic National Convention. She was preceded immediately onto the stand by the former head of the CIA, Leon Panetta. So the transformation has been complete on the issue of war, on the issue of free speech, the same thing. These are the people who dismantled free speech. You have all of the top leaders, the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, John Kerry, in the last couple of weeks, making statements that free speech is a privilege in this country. It's not a right, it's a privilege. And that the government has an obligation to censor our speech, to remove misinformation and disinformation. And the government never cuts the tongue out of a man for lying. They cut the tongue out of the man for telling the truth. And a government that has the power to silence its critics has a license for every kind of atrocity. It became the party. My uncle Ted Kennedy wrote Title IX, which protected women's sports, and the modern Democratic Party is against women's sports. The Democratic Party that I grew up with was the party that opposed the emergence of corporate domination over our government, And today, you know, the Democratic Party is the party of big tech, big pharma, big data, the military-industrial complex, Wall Street, the big banks. Those are their funders. And I mentioned this. We were the party, and Tulsi mentioned this, of the cops and firefighters and labor unions. 62% of Teamsters now support Donald Trump. The head of the Teamsters, Union, Sean O'Brien, spoke at the Republican National Convention. You have the pipe fitters, the steam fitters, all these firefighters, all these unions that are now endorsing Republican candidates. About in 2020, when I was a kid, 70% of the wealth in the country was controlled by Republicans and 30% by Democrats, because we were the party of the poor. In the 2020 election, half the country voted Democratic, half voted Republican. The half who voted Democratic controls 70% of the wealth. The half that voted Republican control 30% of the wealth. So this inversion of the Democratic Party and Republican Party is now complete. And of course, on the issue of children's health and public health, the Democratic Party has always been at the forefront. And the Republicans were on the side of the medical cartel and big pharma, and today it is exactly the opposite. You have Kamala publishing, and Tim Walz publishing advertisements showing them eating Doritos. And the Republican Party is now the party of healthy people that want health for our children.
Haven't you heard, Bobby, that those of us who, you know, try to work out, stay in shape, eat healthy, and take care of our bodies, we are now the right-wing conservative. That's a right-wing conservative way of life.
It's a right-wing conspiracy to believe that they're poisoning us. And
be healthy.
And I mean, one of the telling things that happened this week is that Bill Gates made his first political contribution in history. He gave $50 million to Kamala Harris. Now, do you think he did that because out of a patriotic impulse? And do you think he did that out of a humanitarian impulse? Oh, he did that to protect his wealth and his system, which he calls philanthrocapitalism, which is a way of making yourself rich by pretending to give money away to good causes. And he wants to keep that. He just got indicted in the Netherlands and is going to trial. Yeah. And I published an Instagram post or an X post that said, "You're welcome, Kamala," because I'm quite sure that the reason that he gave that is he does not want me running the health system in this country and looking into his business practices.
That's right.
He sees a big return on investment, he hopes. But the thing, sorry, Monica, the thing he's counting out is the thing that I think we've seen time and time again is that people like Bill Gates and Kamala Harris, they forget about the power of the people in a free country exercising our right to free speech and our right to vote to determine who we want to serve in our government. And that's what gives me so much hope in this election, because we've had the privilege of being able to travel across the country and visit with so many people in different places, small towns, big cities. And in every place that we go, there are people who are Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians, former Democrats, but people coming together not because we all agree in lockstep on the same thing, but we really recognize the threat to our freedoms, how serious it is, and how it is our imperative to save our country. It's up to us.
Can I pick up on that? I'm going to go a little bit off script because this is a really important point. Both of you have identified elements of the system, the permanent administrative state that really runs this country. And it's now fully absorbed the Democrat Party. That system that actually does run the country has been weaponized against all of you, against the American people, in every single way that you both have laid out. How grave a threat is that to a representative republic like we are supposed to have? And are you both of the opinion that those institutions, the three-letter agencies, can be reformed? Or is the corruption, the rot so deep that we need to raise these institutions to the ground and start again? Bobby?
Oh, I think they can be reformed. And I've spent 40 years suing these institutions, so it's not just the intelligence agencies, but all of the institutions of our government have been captured by the industries that they're supposed to regulate. The NIH, CDC, and FDA have been captured by the pharmaceutical industry and the medical cartel. People are making money on sick children and on keeping us sick. The insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, the healthcare companies, the hospitals, even the medical schools are all bought off and tied in by this kind of money, and they've turned our public health agencies predatory against the American public. The FCC, which I sued recently successfully, I sued them in the Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. for lying to the American public about the safety of cell phones and of cell phone radiation. And they've been captured by the big telecom companies. The EPA has been captured by the big polluters. The USDA has been captured by big ag. USDA was created to protect the small farmers and to ensure that we would have a wholesome food supply, but it does just the opposite. It's making war against small farmers, and it's ensuring that Monsanto and Cargill and the big chemical companies, Syngenta, et cetera, control our food supply and are able, without any kind of impediment, to poison the American public. The CIA, which is supposed to protect our national security, instead is protecting the profit interests of military contractors, and its primary job today is to ensure a constant pipeline of new wars to feed the military-industrial complex. Oh, you have all of these agencies that are captured, but I know, on each of those agencies how to unravel corporate capture. For example, FDA gets 50% of its budget from the pharmaceutical companies and other industries that it regulates. We need to end that. NIH, scientists and NIH itself collect royalties on drugs they develop, so they've gone from being a scientific research agency to becoming an incubator for new pharmaceutical products with a partnership with those agencies, USDA, as I said, and NIH and CDC have created foundations. It's illegal for them to take corporate money, but they've created foundations that can collect and do collect hundreds of millions of dollars a year in corporate money and pay them off. And we need to end those. We need to end the financial entanglements. And in many of these agencies, I know the specific individuals that need to be moved out immediately. We're going to fire every nutrition scientist. So, my daughter-in-law, who ran my campaign, is the smartest person I've ever met, Amaryllis Fox, who was did a beautiful interview yesterday on Tucker that I urge you to watch. It's one of the best interviews I've ever seen. You'll see her brilliance and her eloquence and her encyclopedic knowledge. She spent 10 years working for the CIA. She joined immediately after 9/11 out of an idealistic impulse. But what she says is, there's 20,000 people who work for that agency, and 19,000 of them are good American patriots and good public servants. But the top echelon of that agency is corrupt and utterly corrupt. In fact, I had a dinner with Mike Pompeo in Las Vegas about 8 months ago. And during dinner, I've never liked Mike Pompeo. I've always admired him because he's a brilliant, brilliant man, but he's a neocon. and he believes that these wars, eternal wars, are a way of keeping U.S. hegemony across the globe. And I just think that's a bad idea, and it's been disastrous for our country, but he believes it. He said to me during that dinner, he turned to me and he said, the worst mistake of my public life has been when he was head of the CIA. He said, I did not fix that agency. And he said, I could have, but I didn't do it. And then he turned and he said, this is a quote, the entire upper echelon of that agency is made up of individuals who do not believe in the institutions of the United States of America. And those people need to be moved out. And my father had a plan for reforming the CIA, which is the hardest of all these agencies to reform. And my uncle John Kennedy, during the last tranche of documents that were released from the Kennedy assassination files, among them was a plan that President Kennedy had that was written by Frank Makowitz and Dick Goodwin of how to reorganize that agency so that it begins fulfilling the actual mission for which it was created, and that is to break up the espionage division from the plans division, which is the paramilitary division which fixes elections in foreign countries and buys newspapers and assassinates foreign leaders and creates wars. Oh, I would do the same thing that my father was going to do, that my uncle was going to do, which is to break up those divisions, which are now collaborating with each other, and instead make them look over, give the espionage division, which is the information gathering division, a oversight authority over the plans division so that there's some accountability. And so that, anyway, I don't think we burn these agencies to the ground. I think that with determined leadership and fearless leadership, we can actually make them work for the American public instead of serving the mercantile interests of the industries that they're supposed to be regulating.
Thank you, Bobby. Tulsi?
Yeah, I agree with Bobby, and really when you look at the core of he laid it out across the federal government, really the corporate capture, but at the heart of that, we have people who believe that they know better for us than we do for ourselves. There's this kind of arrogance that we see across our federal government and maybe in other levels of government as well, but it's a really dangerous thing when you have people in such positions of power who are supposedly supposed to be there to listen to the needs of the American people and figure out how best do we help address those needs. Instead, what we see in this abuse of power and this government overreach and this corporate capture is people who really think that it's about them rather than the people. And that, at its core, is what Donald Trump is committed to changing, and the team of people he's assembling to be able to help execute that change. It will be the most disruptive, transformative change in our government than we have ever seen in our lives.
Yes!
The reason I can say that with confidence is because throughout President Trump's first term in office, he not only had front row seats to this, he experienced it himself. And he has not forgotten how these agencies were weaponized against him. And the reason why they were weaponized against him back then and have continued throughout this entire period of time is because he doesn't play their game. He's not there kissing the rings of the powers that be in Washington, and he is there on behalf of the American people to actually solve problems. What he didn't have then, that he is intent on having now, and that Bobby and I and others are helping with, is that team of leaders, not only at the top, but many layers down. There's close to 10,000 political appointees that need to be ready to get in and to do this work, and they need to be people who are not the careerists of Washington who are looking for their next job on TV or their next advancement into some higher office, but people who actually have experience, who know these issues and who have experienced the problems with the overregulation and the red tape and the bureaucracy, who can go in there and cut through that, not just trim the fat. Anyone who says we just got to trim the fat has no idea how bad it is, but actually root out this deep rot of corruption that exists, because they have a heart for service. It is going to piss a lot of people off.
All the right people.
All the right people. But I'm going to tell you right now that if we do our job in electing Donald Trump to the White House, your work, our work, does not stop on election night. That's just when it begins, because you're going to have some of the most powerful entities in the country. You're going to have Democrats and some Republicans, even in Washington, who are not going to be cool with this kind of serious change we're talking about. The only way that we're going to be able to do this if Donald Trump knows that we, the people, have his back.
That's right.
So we all got to be ready for this fight.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that I have confidence that we can actually do this time is I've talked to Donald Trump specifically about this, and he said to me, I said, look, the last time you were in there, you put John Bolton in charge of NSA and Mike Pompeo in charge of the CIA and the State Department, and you put an oil guy, in charge of Department of Interior, a coal guy in charge of EPA, and a telecom lobbyist in charge of FCC, and pharma lobbyist as head of HHS and FDA, Scott Gottlieb. And he said, here's the difference. He said, when I got in last time, I had no idea how to govern. And I got surrounded by donors and corporate people who said, you appoint this guy and appoint that guy. And he said, I appointed a lot of bad people. Now, I was listening this morning to this extraordinary interview that Donald Trump did with Joe Rogan yesterday. And if you haven't heard that, I think you need to listen to it. Americans need to listen to it. It's going to change a lot of opinions for anybody who's changeable. And listen to it. It's going to change their opinion of who Donald Trump is, because he was able to speak with such breadth of knowledge and such granular knowledge about so many wide-ranging issues that he wasn't choosing. This was not the kind of scripted interviews you see with Kamala Harris. This was open season on Donald Trump, and he fielded every question with brilliance, with his authenticity that is completely inaccessible to Kamala Harris. But he said during that interview, he talked specifically about John Bolton. He said, a donor got me to appoint him, and he said he's a great guy. He turned out, and this is what he said. He said he's a really bad guy. And he said, this time I'm not going to do that. He told us that. And what he did, he didn't just promise that, but he did something no other president's done before. Normally, the transition team is not created until November 6th, because GAO, the General Accounting Office, pays for all the costs of the transition team. Trump said, I'm not going to do it this time. I'm not going to do it their way. I'm going to start my own transition team 3 months early. And he got private donors. He got private donors to fund it, and he's appointed 20 people, including me in Tulsi. And there's people of all different kinds of ideology, and people who we're going to have to go up against on that transition team and fight for our vision. But I can tell you this, which is unique: there are no corporate lobbyists on that campaign, on that transition team. And usually it's 100% corporate lobbyists. So it's very, very different, and it gives me lots of hope that this government is going to be different than any government we've ever seen.
I don't know if you've seen some of the headlines, Bobby, but over the last few days there have been some articles written by the mainstream media talking about members, Democrats in Congress and others in the Biden administration who are expressing their grave concern about the fact that President Trump is doing something that has not been done before in what Bobby just talked about, that he has a privately funded transition team that is already getting to work. And they're like, well, how come he's not using taxpayer dollars for this and going through the Government Accountability Office? Something is very wrong here. Well, we should all have hope at how freaked out they are, because we're not allowing Joe Biden's Government Accountability Office to control President Trump's transition team. But this is what we're talking about. They're freaking out because they can't place their moles within the transition team to try to figure out what Donald Trump is doing so that they can spin up their media propaganda machines and try to preempt and undermine the work that we are doing to bring great patriots together to actually fix the government. So the doing things different has already started, and the more you hear these people in Washington that freak out, the more you should know, like, all right, we're doing good.
I want to tell you guys how critically important it is to have these two superstars on President Trump's team going forward. And I want to share a quick little story with you guys. Quick little story to illustrate my point about how important these two individuals are. I worked with President Nixon in the last years of his life, and he was very close to the late Democrat Senator of New York, Daniel Patrick Moynihan. They were both intellectuals, and they used to share books and spend hours in conversation about policy and politics. When Richard Nixon was elected president, on his very first day in the Oval, he brought in Senator Moynihan. And Moynihan said to him, Mr. President, I want to tell you that the greatest piece of advice I can give to you is that you need to uproot pretty much the entire executive branch, root and branch, because it needs to be reformed once every generation, so once every 20 or so years, because if we don't do that, you get this kind of deeply entrenched corruption in every government agency. And at the time, it was the late 60s, early 70s, and it had not been done since the end of World War II, when we started the National Security Council and the CIA, et cetera. He recommended Nixon to do it. Nixon was going to do it in his second term, and the deep state got him. So he recommended it had to be a bipartisan effort, and that's why these two heroes are going to take that on with President Trump in his second term. All right. We just have about 15 minutes here. I want to cover national security because you both identified that as a key driver for you leaving the Democrat Party. The Biden-Harris administration has been an historic catastrophe. We have a cost of living crisis. We have a quality of life crisis thanks to the no borders policy and that cataclysm. But we also have a national security crisis. Since Kamala Harris opened up the borders, over 1.7 million potential national security threats have come into the country. That is a government number, not our number. And we've got these hot wars in the Middle East and Ukraine. As you pointed out, Bobby, the Democrat Party now is the warmonger party, and the Republican Party is now the party of peace. How did we get here? And when President Trump is reelected, how are we going to manage this, once again, through peace through strength?
You know, we talked about the transformation of the Democrat Party, but I think it's important to also talk about the transformation of the Republican Party. And this is one of the reasons why I decided to join the Republican Party, and what I shared with President Trump was really specifically because of his leadership. We saw a Republican Party that used to be almost uniformly the party of warmongers, now have a president who in the last 3 elections has been, much to the ire of the Dick Cheneys and John Boltons of the world, gathered the support of the American people who are sick and tired of these stupid wars that have taken so many lives, so much of our taxpayer dollars, and have been counterproductive to our own safety and security and our own liberty. Bobby talked about the Patriot Act. When we talk about the cost of war, yes, really it's in three major ways. It is the cost of human lives, the lives of our brothers and sisters in uniform. It is the cost to us as taxpayers. But as with every major war that we've seen, there is always a cost to our liberty, because we have people like George W. Bush and Dick Cheney who said that unless Congress supports the passage of the Patriot Act and these egregious violations of our own civil liberties, then they're traitors. And that if the American people want to be safe, then you've got to give up just a little bit more of your liberty. And once those freedoms are lost, we never get them back. Case in point, as we sit here today, the Patriot Act continues to be rubber stamped with reauthorizations over and over again. During the 8 years that I was there, people like me and Thomas Massie and Justin Amash and Rand Paul and others, we fought against that rubber stamp. And every single time they use the same smear attacks us as they did in the days after 9/11 when they fear-mongered to push that through, which is literally, quite literally, standing on the House floor, people saying that those who oppose the Patriot Act are traitors and inviting another 9/11 style attack on our country, not even allowing any discussion about how these massive overreaches and violations of our civil liberties have they saved us from another 9/11 style attack. There's no allowing for a discussion on the nature of these authorizations. And the most recent one that passed again with bipartisan support, which is why it's important for us to hold these leaders accountable, it took an already egregious Patriot Act and put it on steroids, expanding those authorizations, making it so that our government can continue its warrantless surveillance against Americans. Now, some of my friends say, well, gosh, what are you worried about? Why are you concerned? If you're not a terrorist, you shouldn't be worried. You got nothing to hide, right? But when you look at the increase in these authorizations that are very vaguely worded intentionally, and then you look at how the government has been weaponized against Donald Trump, against Bobby Kennedy. You've seen a target on Elon Musk's back. You've seen, I was added to this secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. You've seen everyday Americans whose names will never be in the news, but who have been and are being surveilled by our own law enforcement agencies as potential domestic terrorists. Everyday Americans. Why? Because they say things that the government doesn't agree with. Because they happen to be something that the FBI calls radical traditionalist Catholics who need to be surveilled when they go to a traditional Latin Mass. This is why these authorities are so dangerous, because we cannot assume, based on precedent, that the powers that be actually respect our freedom and have our best interest at heart. They care about their power. So the cost of war is real, and under the leadership of President Trump, he has demonstrated he's really the first Republican candidate and president and leader in our time who's had the courage and the strength to stand up for peace. That when he is asked in a CNN town hall, for example, or during the recent debate, with regard to the proxy war against Russia with Ukraine, do you want Ukraine to win the war? His answer to that question is, every time, I want the war to end. I want people to stop being killed senselessly. And when you see the war machine and their friends in propaganda media and big tech, they can't handle that answer. And they criticize him for it, and they attack him for it, which just kind of speaks to the sick mindset of these people who are more interested in feeding the military-industrial complex than actually standing up for human life and saying, hey, let's bring the parties together. We've known from the very beginning in this example that the only way this conflict ends is through a negotiated treaty or agreement of some sort. From the very beginning. The highest levels of our military have said this from the very beginning. The only way this ends is through a negotiation. It has been our government that has not only not attempted to bring the parties together to negotiate an end, they have blocked over and over and over again other countries stepping in and saying, hey guys, this has got to stop. Having a president and commander-in-chief who recognizes the cost of war, who respects our men and women in uniform and the price that they pay, the price that their families pay, and someone who is as committed to peace as President Trump is. What he says in public is what he has said to us in private, that he wants to end wars, not start them. It's real. It's real. And I will just say about Kamala Harris, this was something that I saw back in 2019 when we were both running for president in a Democratic primary. I warned the American people back then how dangerous she would be as commander-in-chief because she is clearly insecure and weak. We see it on display every time she is in any kind of town hall or interview setting, anytime she's not reading from a teleprompter. If she is in a position to be commander-in-chief, her first priority will be to project strength. And so her move will be to try to mask her insecurity and weakness by using our military to try to prove to the world how tough she is. I can't tell you how many of my friends who I still serve with in the military today who have privately communicated to me they are terrified of that prospect because we have no doubt that she will go and start some war in some other country or send our military out into harm's way for no other reason than her trying to look tough and carry out on that bellicose speech that she gave at the Democratic Convention. We are embroiled in multiple wars around the world. We are closer to the brink of World War III on numerous fronts now and closer to the brink of nuclear war than we ever have been before, not by accident, but because of the foreign policy decisions and the failure of leadership of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. So for any of you who have friends or family who are still undecided about how they're going to vote in this election, maybe they don't like the way President Trump talks about things, or maybe they're not quite sure, like, how do you find the facts and the truth and all of the propaganda that's out there? I urge you to bring this issue up to them because this one will impact every single one of us as Americans. And there is a certainty that what we've seen over these last 4 years will not only continue, it will get exponentially worse and it'll impact every one of us on every level.
I just began by echoing something that Tulsi said about Kamala Harris. None of us really knows who Kamala Harris is because I don't think Kamala Harris knows who she is. I think she's struggling to figure that out, but the one thing that we know about her is that she likes to read off a script. And who is going to be writing that script? The foreign policy script is going to be written by the CIA and by the warmongers, the same as her speech at the Democratic Convention was written by those nefarious forces, and those are the forces that put her in power. She didn't win an election. She was put in power by a palace coup, by people, the same people who wanted a president in office who had extreme cognitive impairment and dementia. And they were content with that because they were able to write his scripts. He was reading off of scripts too. They want a president who will read their script. And their script is about continuous war. And I was warned by a lot of friends when I made the choice to endorse President Trump, you can't trust him because he's transactional. Well, I've come to believe that that is one of his strongest assets. He's transactional. He sees that we're all getting screwed. And he's looking at, what historians